thank you all for joining this webinar. Very topical subject, and will be even more topical in the weeks and months that we have ahead. So we're very, very lucky and honoured to have Donna Obstfeld with us today. I think what caught my eye about Donna, HR's always seems a bit of a dull subject until you need a consultant or a manager. Nobody really loves that subject. It's always, let's get somebody else to do it. But in Donna's synopsis, it mentions she's a businesswoman and she doesn't use the terms HR manager or HR consultant. And I think that was really what resonated with the chamber, because actually we're all business people, and the business is important as well as the people that you have working for you. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Donna and she will take us through her slides.
Thank you, Briege. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is going to be a very fast-paced presentation. I realised when I was putting it together that I was probably covering 4 separate webinars in a period of about 25 minutes. So I am expecting loads of questions at the end. That's fine. I'm going to crack straight on and I will take questions later. So just very briefly who I am. So I am the founder and managing director of DOHR. We're a one-stop shop HR practice. I've got 25 plus years HR experience, and my background is that I've got a degree from the University of Hertfordshire in business and psychology. I'm a chartered member of a chartered fellow of the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, and also a qualified mediator. So with everything that is going on and everything that I'm going to talk to you about this afternoon, the 5 C's are the most important elements to hold in mind here. Whatever you do, you need to communicate really clearly. You need to be consistent across your staff and your policies. You need to be as clear as possible with the messages that you're putting out. Have a heart. People are going through a really, really tough time right now, and that's you as business owners as well as your staff. And then compliance, because actually when doing the right thing gets you into trouble, doing what feels right gets you into trouble, that can be quite a challenging position to be in. So make sure that whatever you do it with compliance. The first thing that has absolutely changed is hiring. I know that because I've just had to go through that process myself since we've been in lockdown. And nobody knows what their next superstar is going to look like or where they're going to find them these days. But what we do know is that the jobless rate is increasing. Unemployment figures are soaring, which means that it is going to become a employers market, which means that there will be a lot more CVs coming into your inbox. There will be a lot more people to choose from, and it's really, really important that you manage to get the right person within your business. So pre-COVID, you might have put out a job advert, you might have used a recruitment agency. There'd have been a CV, a cover letter, you'd have gone through some telephone screening, you'd have brought them in, you'd have had at least 1 face-to-face meeting, if not 2, maybe with yourself, maybe with members of the team. You'd have potentially put them through some kind of assessment. Very often businesses run mini assessment days. I certainly know one client that brings them in. If they're not there at 7 o'clock in the morning for their assessment, they get locked out, that's it. They're very much looking for the right attitude. And then sometimes some of our clients have used trial days as well to see what that person's actually like in the office, on the phone, mixing with the team. That's kind of all gone out the window now. A lot of people aren't in the offices, or certainly not at the moment, and can't necessarily get 5 or 6 people into a room for an assessment centre or for face-to-face interviews. So trying to do things differently in a post-COVID world is going to involve a lot more of this, a lot more Zoom. So I use LinkedIn a lot for recruitment, fantastic platform if you haven't tried it, but it gives you now the opportunity to ask people to, once they've submitted their CVs, to answer 2 questions as a video. So you get that first point of contact, not on the screen, but in person with them. And I use those as screening. You know, how articulate are they? Are their examples good? Have they answered the question that they were asked to answer? Have they taken the time to actually do that next stage of the process? Because there's a lot of people who will just send out CVs and they don't really know what they're applying for. So if you make people actually conscious about the vacancy that you've got, at the end of the day, it's a two-way process. They have to choose to come and work for you as much as you're choosing whether they are right for your business. Telephone screening. I'm doing a lot of telephone screenings, a lot of Zoom interviews. So I'm literally interviewing people on Zoom. And then I'm also sending a written assessment, and I've put together a couple of written assessments, again, to see, you know, we want people who are able to articulate legal points. So how well are they being concise? How well are they able to communicate? If you're going to send out any sort of tests like that, it needs to be really, really relevant to the job that you need them to do for you. At the end of the day, you need to be able to distinguish between 2 or 3 candidates based on your conversation, their video application, their experience, and their interview and their assessment. So make sure that those online tools work as hard as for you as a face-to-face interview would. The really important thing to remember, if my slide changes, is that the law hasn't changed. So whatever you do from a recruitment perspective, you still have to comply with employment law. It hasn't been relaxed. You still have all the equality laws. People still have the right not to be discriminated against. And that's on any of the protected characteristics. So you can't say, oh, this person's too old, this person's going to go off on maternity leave, this person, you know, I want a team of all females in this particular environment. Those things will all still stand regardless of what's going on with COVID. You can have employment tribunal claims from people who are applicants if they feel that they've been unfairly discriminated against. And the other thing that can happen is that they can put in a subject access request and request everything that you hold on them. And that can include any handwritten notes that you've made during your interview. So certainly, and this goes for pre or post-COVID, if you're scribbling notes in an interview and you write on the piece of paper, this person hasn't got a clue, or words that are even ruder than that, if somebody were to put in a subject access request, they would have the right to see what you wrote. And that's just something that you need to be very, very aware of. Managing staff. This has become so much harder for managers. And there are people who are fantastic managers. There are business owners who aren't quite as good on the people management side of things. But what COVID has done is made it 100 times harder, even for those people who were fantastic managers in the first place. The first things first, you need a mandate to manage. For every single employee, they must have a contract of employment. I spoke to a potential client earlier this week who's been going for 30 years, and he's decided that he needs to make some people part-time because of COVID, but actually he hasn't got contracts of employment in place with them. So whereas you have to confirm a change to their contract of employment, they never had a written contract of employment previously. So don't try and shut the stable door after the horse has bolted. Get your foundations in place now, because if you need to rely on them later, this is your opportunity. Make sure that whatever you document in a contract of employment is what you do in practice. There's no point in saying that we'll give statutory sick pay and then just giving everybody 5 days paid sickness in the year, because you're automatically putting yourself in breach of your contract of employment. So whatever you're going to do, whatever you're going to need to rely on, make sure that it is an accurate reflection of what happens within your business. Employee handbook. Now, we don't advocate that every single employer needs an employee handbook, because for some it's just overkill. But where you've got more than 10 employees, or perhaps you've got 2 or 3 different branches, so an estate agent might have 3 or 4 people per branch, but they might have 2 or 3 branches, for example, then an employee handbook is really important because it sets the tone. And actually that handbook is going to become even more important if you've got remote workers, because all of your policies and procedures need to be accessible in one place so that you can rely on them, but so that your staff understand what it is that you're delivering for them, what their expectations are. My magic circles of success. Managing, as I've said, is really hard at the best of times. But by having all 5 of these magic circles in place means that you're able to talk the same language and talk a common language to your employees, so that they not only know what their terms and conditions of employment are and what the company's policies are, but what's the culture of the organisation? How does it feel to work for your business? What are the goals? What are you trying to achieve as a team? And what's that ultimate vision? Why are you doing what you're doing as a business? And if you've got people who are working from home, or you've got people furloughed, or you've got people where you've maybe got teams in part of the week and not part of the week, or you've got a team A and a team B because you're trying to socially distance people, then having these things really clearly communicated helps keep you working as a team, even when actually you're now geographically dispersed. And if you haven't taken an opportunity to work through what your culture, your goals and your visions are, then actually now's a really good time to get those in place, because they will be used throughout your business life, not only when managing your people through COVID. However, it is a tightrope act. You will take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and you will wobble, and you will need to get your balance. Nobody has been through this before. And as an employer and as a business owner, we're asking you to do a lot and to take on a lot as you're managing your people. What do you want and need? What do your employees want and need? Are they shielding? Do they have childcare issues? Are they concerned about their own health? Can you bring them into the workplace? Have you got room to separate them? What's it going to cost you in order to have people working from home? Do you need to buy computers? Do you need to buy chairs? Do you need to pay for their broadband? There's a lot of things that as a business owner you need to get right, and unfortunately you don't have a huge amount of time to get those things right. So it takes some really deep thinking and a lot of planning right now to figure out which side, what balance you need to get, which of those criteria wins in that balance, and is there a point where you can achieve equilibrium. Okay, so managing your workforce on site. I hope that you have all seen this lovely poster that's been put out by the Health and Safety Executive and by the government. You do need to print it off. You do need to display it in your workplace. And the most important thing to note, and it's really interesting because it's the one thing that I'm finding that people are doing all the thinking, but they haven't actually done the risk assessment. So I've seen some fantastic measures being put in place to mitigate the risks in the workplace, whether that's having a team A or a team B, whether that's spreading people out, whether that's having more people working from home. I've got one client where they're having a chauffeur bring some of the employees into work and go and collect others and then take them out to meetings during the day so that they don't have to get on public transport, vehicles being cleaned down in between each time, and they're wearing PPE in the vehicle. Incredible. But when I turned around and said, but what does your risk assessment say? They said, oh, we haven't done it, or we haven't documented it. And it's really, really important that if you're going to put all these fantastic measures in place, that you have a risk assessment that identifies what the issues are. And then the measures that you put in place are addressing the issues that you've raised. So it could be problems with a kitchen area. It could be problems with a breakout area. It could be that you need to get a fire escape open so that you can have a one-way system through the office. But it's really important. The first thing that this poster says that you have done is carried out a risk assessment and shared the results with the people who work in the office. And as a business owner, that's your responsibility. You need to also think about how people are going to get to and from work, and this will depend on where your office is and where your staff live. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and their office is in East London and an employee lives in Northwest London. And the employee is absolutely terrified of getting on public transport. They've got to go all the way into London, change trains, and then go out again. And they are absolutely terrified, to the point that they're having panic attacks about the thought of going back to work. And as a manager and as a business owner, you need to be able to deal with that, because you can't just say, well, okay, then don't come back to work. Because if you do say to somebody, don't come back to work, then there is the risk that you could have a health and safety claim or a unfair deduction from salary claim against you on the grounds of either health and safety or perhaps a disability. So it's really important that you understand what's going on inside the minds and the hearts of all of your staff and enable them to feel comfortable with the situation. And if they can work from home, please remember that the overlying message still from the government is get the economy moving, get people back to work, but that doesn't necessarily mean physically in the office. They can still be encouraged to work from home. Motivation and engagement is absolutely critical. I'm going to talk a little bit more about engagement when I talk about inspiring staff, but this is not just about whether people are motivated to turn up to work to get the money that they need, but it's how engaged they are with what they're working. And whether they're working from home or working from your office, you have to have a workforce that is properly engaged with your business, because otherwise any negativity is going to affect your customers, it's going to affect other people in the office, and it's going to bring performance down massively. So as an employer, as a business owner, you need to make sure that your staff are motivated and engaged and understand that you are doing everything reasonably practical to keep a job for them and to keep your clients serviced and supported. And as I said at the beginning, the 5 C's, communication, consistency, clarity, compliance, and I've missed one out, I'm not sure, but it's on the slides. I will send out the slides afterwards. Okay. Managing your a home-based workforce. In my career, I've spent over 25 years helping employers to say, no, sorry, you can't work from home. You do need to be in the office. And overnight, almost every employer that could has pivoted to enable people to work from home. Now, for some, that's been really hard. I've got a couple of clients that have literally had to pick up desktop, monitors, phones, chairs, mouse, keyboard, and literally deliver it to their employees so that they can work from home. That doesn't make working part of the time in the office and part of the time at home very easy. You're either in one place or another. And as a business owner, you need to get that balancing act right to figure out whether people can work from home or whether they need to be in the office. You need to carry out a risk assessment. When anybody is working from home, they are still your employee. You still have an absolute duty of care towards them, and that's both physically and mentally. And it's important that you stay in touch with them, that they've got good communication, using things like Zoom, Slack, Microsoft Teams, WhatsApp, FaceTime, just enabling your team to bounce ideas off each other, to make sure that they know when you're available, and to have that regular communication is really, really important. To give you confidence that they're doing what they should be doing, to give them the confidence to know what's expected of them. I'm only going to touch on furlough workers. As anyone who was on here earlier at the beginning heard, I've done 6 COVID webinars now, and we've spent a lot of time talking about furloughed workers. At the moment, if someone is furloughed, they cannot do any work for your business. From the 1st of July, they are introducing part-time furloughing. But even if someone is furloughed, they are still an employee. You still have a duty of care towards them. It's important that you know how to communicate with them. And that isn't via your work email, because you don't want them picking up your work emails. That's one of the things that, you know, HMRC may come and check at a later stage if they want to check the validity of your job retention scheme claims. So make sure that you've got somebody's personal mobile number, that you've got their personal email address, or that there's some communication with them so that they know how and when to get in touch with you. And the other thing is that furloughed workers are allowed to undertake training. Now, that doesn't mean that it's training in a workshop, or somebody asked me about a physiotherapist practice, whether they could have a trainee in to practice. That is harder because all of your social distancing still has to apply. But certainly online training or reading or journals, any of that, attending Chamber of Commerce webinars is all training and can all be done from home and improve the quality of the time that your staff have off while they are furloughed. So it's not just about managing people, it's also about inspiring them. And inspiring somebody when they're in the office is hard enough. Inspiring people when they're not in the office, or when they're only half a team in the office, or when they're absolutely terrified of catching COVID, it's challenging, to say the least. I touched on some of these earlier. The organisational framework helps people to understand why they're doing what they're doing and where they fit into the bigger picture. This pyramid works both bottom up and top down, and it's all about helping people to understand their role. And it's really important right now that if somebody's role is changing because they're coming back part-time, because they can no longer come into the office and they have to work from home, and the original job can't be done in the original format from home, it's really important that people's job descriptions, even if they're being changed on a temporary basis, are still clearly communicated, and that they've got objectives, they know what it is they're trying to achieve, and they understand why. And they understand how that fits into what we do as an organisation. And I've seen I'm part of a couple of business networking groups, and there are some people in those business networking groups whose businesses have literally turned off overnight, whether it's because they're a photographer, a videographer, a DJ, events are cancelled. So what else can they do? And if your business is one of those businesses where you cannot do your original thing, whatever your thing was, but you have found something else that you can do, it's really important that you make sure your staff know what and why and how they fit into that. Because if you want them on that same train with you, if you want them on that journey with you, you need their buy-in. And that's about you being open and honest with them and helping them to understand what you need them to do now and for how long and how they'll be measured on it. And that leads really nicely, if the slide changes, into performance management. Because just because you're not in operation normal doesn't mean that you're not managing people. And you still can put in one-to-ones, you just do them by Zoom, or you do them on Microsoft Teams or WebEx or whatever platform it is you're using. You still set them their goals, you still review their goals. If people have got their annual appraisals coming up, do them. There's no reason not to do them. And people still need their personal development plans. Don't use COVID as an excuse. If business has slowed down slightly, it's actually an opportunity to get some of this stuff done that sometimes doesn't happen when we're as mad and busy as we are normally. But people will really, really appreciate it. And it's a chance for you to thank them for doing what they've done with your business at such a difficult time. I touched earlier on employee engagement. Having employees who are engaged with your business is different to having them motivated. Somebody can be motivated to come to work because they want to get out of the house. They could be motivated to come to work because you're going to pay them some money at the end of the week or the end of the month. That doesn't mean that they're engaged. For somebody to be really engaged with your business, it means that they are an advocate for your business, that they are shouting about your business at every given opportunity and would recommend your place as a great place to work, and would tell their friends and families to come and work with you or for you, or customers to come and put their business with you. And it's really important that you understand where your staff are. We use a particular tool, but there are lots of tools available where you survey your staff, you review the outputs, you put a plan in place to address the issues that have been raised. That's then actioned, and 3 months later, you survey again. And you continue that cycle, constantly making tweaks to your business so that your staff are absolutely engaged and become your strongest advocates, happy in the job, reduces a lot of costs. Firing. Now, I've called it firing because actually it could be resignation, it could be redundancy, it could be lots of reasons why people will leave a business. And I have a feeling from talking to a lot of our clients that we are going to begin to see redundancies. I had a big concern last Thursday. I was told, supposedly from a press release, but it turned out, I believe, to be wrong, that we were going straight to the employers having to pay 20%, which is actually where we're going to get to in October, and it's been phased in up until then. And I think that the phasing is going to slow down the rate of redundancies, but there are definitely people who are talking about making people redundant. The one thing I would say to you now is don't do it at the moment, because while the job retention scheme is in place and the government is paying you and your staff, and you're not having to contribute, so that's until the end of July, you don't necessarily have the excuse to make people redundant unless you're actually shutting down your business. If you're shutting down your business, that's a very different situation. But when you make somebody redundant, you have to have a meaningful consultation with them, and you have to look for suitable alternatives. And at the moment, a suitable alternative is to use the job retention scheme. Once you have to start contributing to that, you really need to look at your numbers. You need to look at your cash flow. You need to look at your balance sheet. You need to look at your P&L. And you need to really understand what those numbers are telling you and whether or not you can move people to part-time, whether you really do need to get rid of staff. People are less likely to resign now because they won't have jobs to go to. So you're going to potentially end up with a lot of dead wood. And that's where managing people's performance is really important, and following a proper misconduct, disciplinary capability process is going to become critical. If you need to get rid of somebody because they've done something wrong or because their attitude stinks, you can still get rid of them, but don't call it redundancy, because that will come back and bite you at a later stage. The risks are all still the same. The risks have not changed. So if somebody feels that they've been treated wrongly and that you haven't complied with your company policies and your legal obligations, they can still take a claim against you in the employment tribunal. And at the moment, there is no case law. So we don't know what view the employment tribunals are going to take of employers who have made people redundant or done a shortened process to redundancy. It's impossible to tell, and we don't have a crystal ball. So until there is a case and until there's some case law, by which point we'll be in a different state of furlough. So I would always say make sure you follow your policies and procedures, because your business really can't afford this right now. Your business cannot afford to either defend a claim or to have to pay somebody off. That's a very, very high price to pay. And my 3 golden rules are: always follow your own procedures. Make sure that you understand what the legislation says and where it exists, the case law. And as I said, with COVID, there is no case law at the moment. And if in any doubt, get advice before you do something rather than once you've started down a path, because sometimes it's harder to unpick what somebody has done than it is to actually start down the right path in the first place. That's it. I've done probably 4 hours of webinar in about 28 minutes. So thank you very much for your time. I suspect that there's probably quite a few questions there. But if you do need to contact me, there are my details. And Briege, I don't know if you've got
Yes,
any
I'll come in here.
questions.
Firstly, Donna, thank you very much. You did the complete life cycle of getting the job, applying for the job, all the way through to not having the job, which was fabulous. And you took it from every aspect as well, not just the employer, but the employee too. So I'm going to open up to the room. I really would like you to think of a question, something that maybe wasn't covered in there. I thought it was very interesting, Donna. We have a lot of businesses that are thinking of making redundancies during furlough, even though it's 80% at the moment, and it's a foolish thing to do, because I think there will be claims to say, actually, you could have paid, I could have been in work, and the potential of your business doing pretty well in 6 months' time, 3 months' time could definitely come up. Has anyone else got some questions around the redundancy side, or maybe in the hiring side, as it's changed so much?
Briege, there are some questions on the chat, so
Okay, have a look. So Bal, do you want to raise your question personally while we're... You're on mute, Bal.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can. Hi.
Yeah, if you give notice during furlough, because you know there's not going to be a role for that person, and financially the company's really struggling, so kind of the decision is really out of your hands. Can you claim 80% of the employee's notice period through the job retention scheme, and then top it up so it equals 100%?
Yeah. So just like if somebody is on holiday while on furlough, you can still claim that money. You can do the same with notice pay. If it's money that you are paying to the employee, then yes, absolutely, you can claim from the job retention scheme and then top it up. There's a debate whether or not you need to top it up, and that will come down to the specific wording in the contract of employment. But generally we're advising people to top it up, and a part of that comes from that compassion side of things. The furlough is only a temporary state. It's not a permanent change to the contract, and therefore really if you're going to terminate the permanent contract, you should pay notice at 100%, and therefore yes, claim as much as you can while you can.
Because there's different thoughts and opinions, aren't there? Because obviously there was a recent article about Gordon Ramsay saying that he was trying to claim some money, and technically should he just be paying that himself? Should he not be? So I'm just questioning whether you should actually whether it's right to use the job retention scheme, or kind of bear that cost yourself as an employer. I don't know.
I think that comes down to a moral issue rather than, there are some businesses that just can't afford to pay it. And where people are being made redundant, they're going to have to potentially pay redundancy pay themselves anyway, because they can't claim the redundancy pay through the job retention scheme. And even that, I know probably half a dozen businesses that have had to liquidate, and the staff are going to have to claim everything through the government schemes rather than from the employers. So as an employer myself, and I would say, if you're entitled to claim it, and if it falls within the guidelines, then claim the maximum that you can, but make sure that it does go to your staff, that you're not using it for any other purpose.
Yes, no, of course. Thank you.
Great, lovely, thank you. Maxine, you've asked a question about the risk assessment for working from home. Would you like to come in and...
Yeah, thanks,
Hi.
Briege. Hi, Donna. Thanks for a brilliant presentation. Yeah, it was more just really, I think we're keeping on the side of being extra safe, so we just want to wait and see. So we're more likely to be keeping our team, because we're in a position to do so, stay at home. So I just wanted to understand, you mentioned a risk assessment. Is there a particular risk assessment for keeping people at home rather than bringing them into work?
I've got one on my
Please.
website.
Okay,
I've got one on my
lovely.
website. What I'll do, I'm just trying to think if it's on the main page. I think it is. I'll just put it into the chat, dohr.co.uk/COVID-19. Yeah, so if you go to that, that's our resources page. There's all sorts of information there. If you scroll down, you will find the risk assessment. It's either on that page, or I've actually created a health and safety page, so you might find it on the health and safety page. But there is one there specifically for home workers, and it's got all sorts of ergonomic bits on it as well.
DSE and all that. Okay, thank you so much. Much appreciated.
No problem.
Donna, I have another question before we go to David.
Yes.
So, contract of employment, in the main, that would say that you're working at the place of work, not at home. In this period, because it came upon us so quickly, do we have to change people's contracts of employment for them to work at home?
So you don't actually need to change their main contract of employment. That's still in place. What we're advising people to do is to, under that communication piece, is to communicate to people that they are now working from home, that they need to complete the health and safety, the risk assessment, and that they will be brought back to the office as soon as reasonably possible. A lot of companies haven't done that. It's not as important as writing to people when they're on furlough and getting them to agree to take a significant change. So it kind of depends on the wording in your contract of employment anyway. A lot of contracts will already give employers the right to have you working on a temporary or permanent basis from another place of work within a reasonable distance. So generally contracts will already have that in, but where they don't, then it's not as critical as writing to those on furlough and getting them to agree to the terms. But it is a nice to do if you want to do it.
Lovely. So David, you have a question. Please come in.
Hello there.
Hi, David.
Hi. Literally, this arose this morning.
Okay.
Like many of our employees who've got holiday booked, including myself, various flights have been cancelled and obviously nobody can go away anywhere. This particular employee's got a week's annual leave booked at the end of June, and she emailed me today to ask if she could cancel that annual week's leave and take it later in the year. And as I put in my message, our terms of employment, simply because we try to be flexible, simply state only that reasonable notice must be provided in respect of all holiday requests. So I'm curious as to whether we can still insist that she takes that booked annual leave at the end of the month.
Is she furloughed or is she working?
No, she's working.
Okay. So this is one area where the government have actually relaxed the laws. So normally, under the Working Time Directive, you have to have your 28 days within the annual year. So your 20 days holiday and your 8 days public and bank holiday is your minimum. Yeah. And what they've done is they've said that actually your 20 days, the employer has the choice to relax the rules and carry that holiday forward for up to 2 years.
Yeah.
And Operation Normal, so regardless of COVID, is that technically you can carry forward your public and bank holidays for up to 1 year, although most employers don't allow that. So it then comes down to, what do you want to do? Now, you are allowed to insist that she takes her week's holiday, as long as you give her 2 weeks notice that she needs to take it. Now, there are other ways to achieve that. So one of the things that quite a lot of our clients are doing is for furloughed and non-furloughed, to keep it consistent, is to say you have to have taken at least 50% of your holiday this holiday year.
Yeah.
And then you can use and then you can use the balance of which you have to use at least 50% next holiday year, and the balance of what you've got left in the following year. Others are saying, no, we want them all to take all their holiday this year, and are forcing those people on furlough, for example, to take a week at the end of June, or those people who are working have to have taken 50% by the end of August. So what I would say, whatever you do, be consistent in your approach. It's really hard for people right now because holidays are being cancelled, but actually there may not be an opportunity to get away at all this year. So are you really going to want people to carry forward 20 days into the next holiday year?
No.
It's important, especially if someone's working, that they still get breaks. They still need to recharge. They still need that time away from work, despite everything else that's going on at the moment. So I would come up with a company-wide policy, and then that applies to everybody. And then I would have a one-to-one conversation, say, look, we'd really like you to take it, but actually you don't have to take it by the end of June. If you can take it some point between now and the end of July or the end of August or whatever it is.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Lovely. Anybody else got a question that may have been, it might be a question that's led out of a question that's already been asked that you want more clarification? Anything that we haven't covered that's cropping up in your minds? Natasha.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for that presentation, Donna. Really useful. So I'm an HR director for a student accommodation business, and we furloughed about 100 people that are all in frontline roles. But we took the decision not to take the money, partly on moral grounds, because we thought when the scheme first came out that it would be designed for people, obviously, who were going to really, really struggle. So it's interesting, I appreciate people take what's on offer for different reasons, but it's interesting to hear you sort of advise for businesses to take it sort of if they can. But I appreciate you obviously said it was a moral decision as well. I know you've done a lot of separate furlough conversations, but I thought it was worth mentioning that obviously if someone hasn't been furloughed before, they would need to have been furloughed by the 10th of June.
Yes.
If you were then thinking about, gosh, as we come out of this, we need to make redundancies, etc. So that's obviously something that we're looking at as well now. But
and that's it's quite interesting because actually there are two ways of interpreting the information which has been put out so far. So one is, it very clearly says that in order to furlough people from the 1st of July, they have to be furloughed for the 3 weeks prior to that. But then there's another bit which says that they can have been furloughed previously in order to be furloughed later. And actually we don't have that clarity. We don't. And some of and the clarification is only going to come out on the 12th of June, which is after the deadline for furloughing those people. So we've actually got quite a lot of clients now trying to take a decision that, business may have been okay up until now, but they think it's going to slow down. And therefore, are they going to need people to work part-time in the future? And therefore, is it worth furloughing them for 3 weeks now to give themselves the option for the next 4 months, July, August, September, October, because if they don't do it now, they won't have that option in the future.
Sure. And another thing that you mentioned obviously was about the travel to and from work. So we've got essentially a head office, we don't call it that, but a head office in central London. And obviously most people need to use the underground to get there. And I've been on some webinars. I mean, I would like to think we're a responsible employer and we're obviously taking that into account, but I have been on some webinars where, solicitors are basically saying, well, barristers are saying you haven't got the obligation as an employer to worry about how they get to work. Your obligation starts when they arrive at 9 o'clock or whatever time you've said is their contract. So I think that's going to be really interesting just to see how, businesses manage the whole sort of return, particularly to central London and other busy cities.
Absolutely. And that's where there is no case law. So if somebody absolutely feels that they cannot get on the train and they feel that they are given no option but to resign, are they going to have a claim for constructive dismissal? We actually just don't know at the moment. And that's, you've got employers trying to make some very tough decisions against a backdrop of so much uncertainty. You know, there's a couple of people that I've spoken to this week where the employees could walk to work in central London. It's about 45 minutes walk from home. And actually, there's a lot of people who've been going out and doing a half-hour, 1 hour walk a day as part of their allowance, if you like, to get out. So what I've been saying to employers is it actually encourage your staff to walk to work where they would never have dreamt of walking for 45 minutes in the morning or half an hour in the morning. Actually, they've been doing it for the last 8 weeks while on lockdown. Walking to work and walking home again isn't a bad habit to get into, certainly as we're going into summer. So it's just, you know, people getting on bikes, just thinking of different ways of facilitating people getting to work. I know that a couple of employees have asked about cycle to work schemes. And employers, I'm encouraging them to think about that as an option to help their employees to get to work so that they don't have to drive the car into central London, or they don't have to get onto public transport.
Yeah, funnily enough, and we kind of figured out there once the tubes are up and running, and we got the layout on our floor that people could actually, you know, socially distance and stuff. The biggest challenge, funnily enough, is going to the loo.
Yes.
We can do everything other than, you know, safely get people using the loos.
And that's the same for the airline industry, because they've said that you can get on a plane, but you can't use the toilet. So yes, absolutely.
So lovely. Gordon would like just a little bit further clarification about furlough and holidays, please, Donna.
Can we insist on furloughed workers taking leave during their furlough period? Yes, you can, as potentially they could be on furlough until the end of October, then return and immediately take holiday. So yes, this goes back to what I was saying before. Regardless of what you've got in your contract of employment, legally, as long as you give people notice, which is twice the length of the holiday that you want them to take, you can insist that they take certain amounts of holiday. And if they turn around and say, well, actually, we've never had to do this before, any business that closes down between Christmas and New Year and tells their staff that they have to take that time out of their annual leave is using exactly that law in order to force people to use their own personal leave during Christmas and New Year, or, you know, from Christmas Eve to whenever, but potentially that's 3.5, 4 days that you are telling people comes out of their annual leave entitlement, and you're telling them when to take it. So asking people who are furloughed to take annual leave, you do have to top it up. You do have to pay them at 100% for the days that are on holiday. You do have to get them to book it properly, and you have to record it as you would normally on your annual leave system, so that there is absolutely no doubt about the fact that they have had their annual leave and that they've used it. But as long as you're giving them notice which is twice the length of the amount of time, at least twice the length of the amount of time you want them to take, then yes, you can get furloughed workers to take annual leave while they are on furlough. But it's a gentle conversation, and you need to explain it, and you need to explain why. And during the time that they are on annual leave, don't contact them, don't ask them to do training, don't ask them to join team calls. They are on annual leave as they would be under any other circumstances.
Thank you, Donna. I think that really did clarify it for everybody on the call, because we're all experiencing something very, very new to all of us. So your advice has been absolutely invaluable this afternoon. Your presentation was absolutely fantastic. And I believe we'll be sharing that. I'll bring Alison in as to next steps as to what the Chamber does.
Thanks, Breege. Yeah, well, with Donna's permission, we will send out her a link to her slides, and obviously all her contact details in case anyone wants to follow up with further questions. If that's okay, Donna?
Absolutely fine.
Lovely.
Would you like me to send the slides to you as a PDF and then you can distribute them? Or?
Absolutely, yes, please.
Yep, perfect.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Lovely. Well, thank you all for joining us. I think it's been a great subject matter. Keep your eyes open for our other webinars that are coming up. we're trying to move us all forward from where we were a few weeks ago, which was about Seaballs and the furlough scheme. And as new topics arise, we try and put a webinar on to address that topic and subject matter to help us all. And it's not just all of you, it's us as well, understand exactly where we're going. But Donna, thank you so much for today. It's been a very, very insightful webinar and discussion. Thank
Pleasure.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. It's been excellent.